We do have the latest developments on the kidnapping of Nancy Guthrie, the mother of Today's Show co-host Savannah Guthrie. As we near the 2-week mark of Nancy Guthrie's disappearance,
there are cases that fade from memory within days. Press conferences held, leads exhausted, files quietly shelved. And then there are cases that refuse to let go. Cases where every answer seems to birth 3 more questions, where the deeper investigators dig, the stranger the terrain becomes. The disappearance of Nancy Guthrie is that second kind of case. But in recent weeks, something shifted beneath the surface of this investigation. Not metaphorically, literally. Because what federal agents reportedly discovered beneath and around the property connected to this case has left seasoned investigators, forensic specialists, and legal analysts struggling to find the right words. Today, we are going to walk through what is known, what has been confirmed, and what the evidence is beginning to suggest. This is not speculation dressed as fact. This is a careful examination of a case that just got significantly more complicated. To understand why this case matters, you first have to understand who Nancy Guthrie was before she became a headline. She was not a woman who sought attention. She was not someone who lived dramatically. Nancy was an 84-year-old grandmother who had spent more than 5 decades quietly rooted in the Catalina foothills outside Tucson, Arizona. She was born Nancy Long in Kentucky, and she built her life the way people of her generation often did, through persistence, through service, through showing up consistently for the people around her. When her husband died suddenly in 1988, she did not disappear into grief. She raised her children. She stepped further into her career at the University of Arizona, where colleagues described her as composed, thoughtful, and deeply principled. She was the kind of person who advocated for programs she believed in without needing credit for doing so. Outside of work, she cared for her aging mother, and she welcomed her brother, who had Down syndrome, into a guest house on her property. She was, by every account, a woman who organized her life around loyalty and quiet strength. In her later years, age had changed some things but not everything. She used a cane. She wore hearing aids. A pacemaker regulated her heart. Daily medication was non-negotiable. But those who knew her closely insist that her mind remained completely sharp. She read constantly. She kept a journal. She played mahjong strategically. Just days before she disappeared, she celebrated a birthday with close friends, shrimp, grits, fresh bayonets, and confirmed plans to attend a church service the following Sunday, as she had done countless times before. There was no sign of fear, no indication of danger. She was present in her life, engaged in her routines, and entirely unaware of what was coming. Her youngest daughter, Savannah Guthrie, is known nationally as a co-anchor of NBC's Today Show. But Nancy never leaned into that connection publicly. Neighbors describe her home as warm and unassuming, set back among desert brush and cactus, filled with books and quiet dinners and long friendships. It was not the kind of home people associate with national investigations. Until it became exactly that. January 31st was unremarkable in every visible way. Nancy had dinner with her daughter Annie and her son-in-law. They spent several comfortable hours together. Around 9:48 in the evening, she returned home to the Catalina foothills. The garage door opened. 2 minutes later, it closed. Her son-in-law watched until she was safely inside. That was the last confirmed moment anyone saw her. The house appeared normal. No alarms triggered. No emergency calls placed. The neighborhood remained still and quiet, as it almost always did. But in the early hours of February 1st, a sequence of events unfolded that would permanently alter this case. At 1:47 in the morning, the front door camera was disconnected. Approximately 25 minutes later, a motion sensor on the property activated, but stored no usable footage. At 2:28 in the morning, Nancy's pacemaker stopped communicating with her cell phone. That phone was later found inside the home. She was no longer near it. 40 minutes. That is the window investigators kept returning to. 40 minutes between ordinary and unthinkable. By late morning on February 1st, the family knew something was deeply wrong. Nancy had planned to watch a church service with a friend. She had confirmed it in advance, and she never arrived. Calls went unanswered. Messages went unreturned. Family members drove to her home just before noon. What they found was devastating in its quiet detail. Her car was still in the driveway. Her wallet was inside the house. Her daily medication had not been touched. Her hearing aids, items she depended on medically, were left behind. And near the front porch, there was blood. DNA testing would later confirm it was Nancy's. The doorbell camera mount was empty. The device had been removed. Sheriff Chris Nanos later stated publicly that there were signs of force at the property. Investigators immediately treated the home as a crime scene and opened a formal investigation into a possible abduction. The camera footage that was recovered showed a masked individual, gloved, backpack on, estimated between 5 feet 9 inches and 5 feet 10 inches, moving around the exterior of the home in those critical pre-dawn hours. The figure blocked the camera lens with a gloved hand and used leaves in an attempt to obscure it further. The abduction itself was not captured, but the presence of that figure, combined with the blood, the missing camera, and Nancy's abandoned medication, told a story investigators could not ignore. What followed was one of the most resource-intensive local investigations in Arizona's recent history. Tips flooded in from across the state and from beyond its borders. Law enforcement reported receiving more than 30,000 calls, emails, and online submissions within the first several weeks. Every piece of information had to be logged, reviewed, and either pursued or ruled out. Hundreds of deputies, detectives, and FBI personnel were assigned. Analysts worked extended hours sorting digital submissions. Officers canvassed surrounding neighborhoods, collected surveillance footage from nearby properties, and examined phone records. Ransom notes surfaced early. A local television station received a message claiming to be from Nancy's kidnapper, demanding millions of dollars in Bitcoin in exchange for her release. Other outlets reported receiving similar communications. The notes were structured. They included deadlines. They warned against law enforcement involvement. But there was no confirmed proof of life attached to any of them. Deadlines passed. No verified follow-up came. No release occurred. Whether the notes were genuine demands or calculated attempts to exploit a high-profile situation remained publicly unresolved. Savannah Guthrie addressed this directly in a series of videos released to the public. In the first, she appeared alongside her siblings and read carefully from prepared notes, asking clearly for proof of life. She acknowledged that audio and video can be manipulated and said her family needed something undeniable before any further steps could be taken. In a second video, the tone shifted toward direct appeal. She confirmed publicly that her family was willing to pay. In a third, standing alone, without siblings or a written script, she spoke slowly and simply. "It's never too late to do the right thing," she said. She repeated it. She appealed not to a transaction but to conscience. Hope remained visible. Evidence of contact did not amid the sweeps of the surrounding desert terrain. One item separated itself from the rest. Found approximately 2 miles from Nancy's home, in a field beside a road, was a single glove. Its color and material were consistent with the gloves worn by the masked figure captured on the doorbell camera footage. That visual connection alone was not conclusive, but it was enough to justify immediate forensic attention. The glove was submitted for DNA analysis. Early findings confirmed the presence of an unknown male DNA profile. The genetic material did not belong to Nancy, and it did not match anyone known to investigators as part of her immediate circle. That detail elevated the item significantly. Investigators moved to run the profile through CODIS, the FBI's combined DNA index system, which contains millions of profiles from convicted offenders and from prior investigations. If the sample matched a profile already in the database, identification could follow quickly. If it did not, the profile would be stored and held for future comparison. Investigators also explored the potential use of investigative genetic genealogy, a method that has broken several cold cases by comparing crime scene DNA against profiles voluntarily submitted to public ancestry databases. Even when a suspect has never submitted their own DNA, a relative may have. By identifying familial matches and building backward through family trees, analysts can narrow a search to a list of possible individuals. The process requires time and careful handling, but it has produced results in cases that had otherwise stalled entirely. Former law enforcement officials with experience in high-priority abduction cases noted that under urgent circumstances, and this was unquestionably urgent, standard testing timelines can be compressed. Given Nancy's age, her medical needs, and the number of days already elapsed, every hour carried weight. This is where the investigation moved into territory that few cases ever reach. As federal agents expanded their search perimeter and began conducting more detailed forensic examinations of properties connected to persons of interest, they encountered something that was not on any blueprint, not included in any permit filing, and not visible from any standard property survey. A concealed underground passage, a tunnel, by every structural description, was discovered in connection with a location linked to the investigation. It was not a crawl space. It was not a utility corridor. It was a deliberately constructed, deliberately concealed underground route. The discovery did not make immediate public headlines. In complex federal investigations, certain findings are intentionally withheld from press briefings while forensic teams complete their work and prosecutors evaluate the legal implications of what has been found. What investigators encountered inside that passage, however, reportedly triggered a significant escalation in the federal component of the case. Multiple law enforcement sources, speaking on background given the sensitivity of the ongoing investigation, indicated that the tunnel contained materials and evidence inconsistent with any innocent explanation. Among the items reportedly recovered were restraint equipment, communications devices, and materials suggesting the location had been used, or prepared for use, to hold a person against their will. The construction of the passage itself indicated advanced planning. This was not improvised. This was not the work of someone acting impulsively on a single night. The engineering involved, the concealment involved, and the items found within pointed clearly toward premeditation at a level that shifted the entire framing of what happened to Nancy Guthrie. What does it mean when investigators find a tunnel? It means they are no longer looking at a crime of opportunity. It means they are looking at a criminal enterprise, one that required time, resources, planning, and the cooperation or silence of at least some people in proximity to the construction. A tunnel does not appear overnight. A tunnel does not appear without someone knowing it is there. Federal agents brought in structural engineers to assess the passage's age and construction timeline. They brought in forensic teams to process every surface within it. They cross-referenced the materials found inside against purchasing records, construction supplies, and known persons of interest. Every item recovered became a thread. Every thread became a direction. And the investigation, which had been operating across dozens of parallel tracks, began to converge. Early in the investigation, law enforcement publicly acknowledged that they were not narrowing the case to a single theory. They described exploring multiple possibilities: a burglary that escalated unexpectedly, a targeted abduction motivated by Nancy's connection to a nationally known public figure, a ransom scheme planned well in advance. The discovery of the tunnel does not eliminate all of those possibilities, but it does make several of them significantly less credible. A burglary that escalates does not involve tunnels. An opportunistic crime does not involve tunnels. What tunnels suggest, what their existence demands as an explanation, is deliberate, patient, advanced planning. Someone knew this tunnel would be needed. Someone built it before Nancy Guthrie ever went missing. That is not a spontaneous act. That is preparation. The ransom theory, by contrast, becomes more coherent in this context, not less. If someone constructed a concealed space capable of holding a person, and if that person then went missing with ransom notes arriving in the hours that followed, the tunnel becomes a potential holding location, a place designed to keep a victim out of sight while negotiations were conducted. The sophistication of that plan, if confirmed, would indicate either prior criminal experience, outside expertise, or both. Investigators are now working to determine how long the tunnel has existed, who had access to the property where it was found, and whether any DNA recovered from within it matches the profile found on the glove discovered in the desert. If those two samples connect, if the same individual whose DNA is on that glove also left biological material within the tunnel, it would represent a forensic chain of evidence of considerable prosecutorial value.